class. Last week we talked about Red Lion and Miami Herald, right? This is the power of the state to regulate media entities. The holding in Red Lion was that newspapers had scarce resources and you could not compel them to run a retraction or run a reply because that was their editorial judgment. By contrast, in Red Lion, the court said that running a radio station is a privilege. There are scarce resources, no obligation to have this, and it's no big deal to require the radio station to run a right of reply. Right, so these are two cases that are in tension. And then we talked about the net choice case, right? This is the Florida and Texas law that requires social media companies to basically explain why they take down content. And it bans so-called shadow banning on social media. Okay, that was argued today. Did anyone listen to it? Read about it? You will know. All right. So there were nearly 5 hours of argument today at the court. Actually, no one was in my class last semester. Paul Clement was arguing on behalf of the social media companies. He came to my class last semester. So if you ever want to take my Supreme Court seminar in the fall, register quickly. It fills up very quickly. But we bring in people like Paul Clement to talk to you. And then arguing for Florida was Henry Whitaker, and arguing for Texas was the Texas SG Solicitor General. His name is Aaron Nielsen. I want to play an exchange with Justice Alito. And Alito is trying to hit home the point that is there a difference between a newspaper and a social media platform? We were talking about this last week. I played this a little bit. Okay, so everyone gets the question, right? The analogy between Twitter, X, and Facebook and a newspaper is always very weak, right? Newspaper is limited, only so many columns in a paper, right? Facebook, unlimited space. Okay. So Paul Clement, I think he says Justice Scalia, which is funny because Clement clerked for Scalia. Scalia's been dead for about 7 years now. But I think it was just a slip up. So just run it. Early. Only Paul Clement can get away with it. I know you know this, Alito. Stop being so difficult, right? Yeah. In other words, the argument put forward in Tornillo was that the newspaper basically had a monopoly. That if you wanted to influence the local Miami election, you had to be in this paper of all places. And that's the exact same argument being put forward here that Facebook had basically this monopoly, as if there's nowhere else to go. But in fact, there are other platforms that you can use. Now, I want to play a little bit here. So a theme in today's reading is Lochner. Lochner. See, right, Lochner. Say it 3 times, not like Beetlejuice, right? Nothing will happen. Now you probably learned that Lochner is really bad, right? In con law, like the worst thing in the world. Nonsense. Not true, right? Lochner was probably wrong, but it wasn't that bad. It was reflective of the jurisprudence of the time. I think Lochner's a heck of a lot better than most cases that came later. But I think Lochner's defensible. But it's become almost like a meme in Supreme Court litigation that when you don't like something, you call it Lochner. Roe v. Wade was Lochner, right? Citizens United became Lochner. Whenever the court does something you don't like, you just call it Lochner. It's basically a meaningless label. So you see Lochner, just ignore it. But here, Aaron Nielsen argues that Twitter's like Lochner. Okay, let me play this. Look square. All right. So again, we're basically back to Lochner. Nothing ever changes. It's all the same. I'll find a couple other clips. Justice Kavanaugh asked about a couple of cases we studied. He asked about Buckley. Remember the bonus question. What was the interest in Buckley that allowed them to regulate campaign speech? Who remembers? Who remembers? Bingo. Corruption or the appearance of corruption? Good. What about McConnell v. FEC? What principle are they relying on? Is your memory question for the day. It was the blank principle. Begins with a D. D-I. D-I-S. D-I-S-T. Distortion, right? Distortion. The idea that you could regulate broadcast over the air, right? The on-demand, because it distort the political process. So you have the appearance of corruption and distortion. What Kavanaugh's asking is about the distortion principle in Buckley. So here. By the way, his name was Pasquale Tornillo. It was not Tornillo. He was Italian. He was not Hispanic. They kept saying Tornillo. It's Tornillo. He was Italian. Go on. You're welcome. Pasquale. That's what Pat was short for. Okay. And one thing about Justice Kavanaugh, I gave me a pet quote here. He says the same thing over and over again. He's like almost like a chatbot at times, right? He just repeats himself. So Tornillo, again, Tornillo, again, Tornillo. It goes on and on. I stopped recording it. I want to Barrett for a bit. She's very sharp. I think she gets social media better than the other justices because she's actually of age. She has kids who are of this age, so I think she actually gets it. I just jumped that. I don't know how to happen there. Okay. All right. So Thomas asked a point that I think is significant. When you have output from an algorithm, who's actually speaking? Is it the code or is it Facebook? This will be an issue the court does not want to deal with now, but it's going to be very, very significant later. All right. Kavanaugh comes back to Tornillo over and over again. Tornillo again. So I'm supposed to play. Tornillo. What else here I want to play? Alito had this one funny line. Clement says that YouTube is like a newspaper, and then Alito says, if YouTube was a newspaper, how much would it weigh? Really big. All right. Okay. Questions on net choice and social media stuff.
How did they argue for 5 hours? It was just so many questions.
Oh my God. So there were two separate cases, one from Florida, one from Texas. The Florida one went for 2 hours and about 30 minutes. And then the one from Texas went for about an hour and a half. So basically, I'm sorry, I can't count. It's about 4 hours total. Went forever. Used to be in the good old days that Chief Justice Rehnquist was a stickler. He would cut you off at an hour. Now Roberts let them run on forever. And even worse, they do this thing called the seriatim round, one at a time, where after your time's up, each justice gets unlimited time to ask as many questions as they want. So what could be 30 minutes of argument time might stretch for 90 minutes, just for one lawyer, straight. It's a terrible innovation. I've talked to a lot of Supreme Court advocates. Almost everyone likes the old times, but the court sort of seems to settle on. More is not better, right? More questions isn't always good. It just goes on forever and it drags on and nothing really gets accomplished. Yeah, so 4 hours, not five. I'm sorry, but it felt like 5 hours. All right, other questions? Yes, Julie. Go ahead.
May not subject your names in the case, but do you think the questions that get asked ever indicate which way a justice is leaning?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, I mean it's called sort of reading tea leaves, but it's a pastime. The general rule of thumb is when a justice is asking hostile questions to one side, they're signaling which way they're going to vote. I mean, again, some are very predictable. Justice Kavanaugh comes in with his mind made up. There's never a doubt how he's going to vote. He comes in, he says the same thing over and over again because basically he has his questions ready. Barrett does this thing. It's actually really, she says, assume I disagree with you. That means she disagrees with you. She always says this. She gives it away very easily. Gorsuch also, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He gets very high and mighty, and you know how he's going to vote. Justice Thomas, he can be open-minded. People don't like him very much, but he does ask questions both sides very carefully. Sotomayor, she's like counselor. She has this intonation. You know she's against you. During the insurrection case last week, she referred to some scholars. You know those were? Me. She said, some scholars have argued with this scoff in her voice. She's looking at me. It happens. The chief is like a poker player. I mean, anyone play poker? A good bluffer? I'm not. I can't bluff for anything. Don't. I'll never lie because I can't. The chief, he can play his cards close to the vest. You don't know which way he's going. It's actually very frustrating. And he will deliberately stay quiet for almost like an hour. Then he'll just pipe up with like one question. It's like, wait a minute, which way is he leaning? And then you don't always know. Kagan usually comes to play. She usually has her questions lined up. Kagan is probably the court's best questioner, with I think Barrett maybe a close second in my mind at least. So Kagan, you usually know from her questions which way she's leaning. She was somewhat conflicted today. She wasn't. I think she's going to rule in favor of the social media companies, but she's somewhat conflicted. What else did I forget? Alito, yeah, there's no doubt how he's going to vote. He comes right out and he just says his questions are very cutting. He goes right to the core. He doesn't let you wiggle away at all. It's sort of horrifying actually. And Justice Jackson, she talks a lot. Her questions, I think, are. How do I put this? I think there's a lot to her questions, but because she's asked so many, people say, "Oh, this is just a lot of babble." She has good stuff in there, but she just talks for a very long time. There's actually statistics showing how many minutes each justice speaks for. I mean, I should have my statistics over here. Right. So, it just says justice. You can't see it. But I mean, Jackson speaks for far more than any other justice consistently. But if you look at the number of questions she asked, they sort of just go on and on. But I actually like her. I think she's of all the ones that Biden could have picked. I'm actually thinking that he made the right call, at least from our perspective.
Based on the arguments and the questions.
Good follow up. So the challenging part. Oh, this is actually useful. So do you remember RAV versus St. Paul? We did the overbreath doctrine. Remember, this actually came up in the concurrence of Justice White, where, maybe there might be some reasons why banning racist speech is permissible, but because the cross-bearing statute swept so broadly, it wasn't permissible. The social media companies brought what's basically an overbreath challenge. Not as applied, they brought a facial challenge, which means basically you have to prove it's unconstitutional in, I'll be careful, almost all of its applications. Let me play this one. there might be some instances where the statute is valid. So they brought an example of Gmail, which is actually a very good example. It's just Alito. In other words, what if Google said tomorrow, all right, all Republicans, we're just start deleting your emails randomly. We're not going to take in your posts. We're just delete your emails, right? The Florida law would actually, I think, allow people to sue Gmail for deleting their emails. So what the court might do, though, is actually send it back to the lower court and see how this affects not just social media companies, but email accounts. So, for example, Uber, right? This came up. Could Uber refuse to give rides to Democrats or Jews or Muslims or whatever, right? Because they say you can't use our app. They kept talking about Justice Barrett, bless her heart, from the Midwest. She kept talking about Etsy. She loves Etsy. Like you can tell, she just spends hours. I mean, I adore her, but like she's talking about Etsy. I'm like, I've actually used Etsy. I bought a Constitution mask. Anyway. But anyway, she kept on asking me, Etsy, could Etsy refuse vendors who are certain political preference, right? And because it's a website defined broadly, the Florida law may kick in. So I think they might send the case back down to the lower court to look at these other issues. I don't think they want to decide this case. I think there's just so much going on. The Texas law does not apply to these sort of other websites. It only applies to social media. So maybe the Texas law stays in ice. I don't know. Yeah, go listen to it. It's on the Supreme Court website. You can read the transcript. I only gave you a few minutes clips here, more than expected, but you're interested in it, so I'm happy to do it. Yes, Cody?
You said that you feel like you can figure out which way justices are going to vote based on the question.
Not always. Sometimes. Sometimes they're very coy.
Do you think that the advocates respond to their questions return their
It's a really good question. So take my Supreme Court seminar in the fall. It's very good. I actually bring in Supreme Court advocates in my class. So Paul Clement came to my class last semester. What they'll say to a point is it's very hard to win a case at the podium, but you can lose a case at the podium. In other words, it's very hard to flip a justice's mind at the podium, but you can mess it up. And they say, wait a minute, counselor, you said this in your brief, but you're saying this now. When you hear that, you're like, oh no, because you screwed up. You cannot deviate from your brief. So if you give an answer that's inconsistent with your position in the brief, that is a sign that you're in trouble. And I've heard this, the judge says, counselor, I thought I agreed with you, but based on what you just said, I'm not so sure anymore. That's enough to give you like a panic attack, right? That's like, oh my God, I prepped for this case for years and I just blew it. I just screwed it up. So yeah, so you can screw it up. It's hard to win though. I've only seen maybe one or two cases in recent memory where the lawyer actually won the case. The case last year was called Groff versus DeJoy. It's actually a First Liberty case. The Solicitor General, Elizabeth Prelogger, she's good. She won that case from the podium. Or maybe in the brief, but I think she actually won that case on the fly. This was about discrimination against a postal worker. So even though she lost the case, she preserved the doctrine. And I had the lawyer for the other side come to my class. It was Aaron Street. Shouldn't be on YouTube, but he was like the way the government litigated the case was just so. I'll mute it for a second, right? All right. So it's funny actually because in common law I play a clip from the Hamilton musical, the bank debate. We all seen the Hamilton musical. We heard it, and YouTube always sends me a copyright strike whenever I put it on my channel because I'm playing the Hamilton song. Anyway, by the way, Hamilton's coming to the Hobby Center this upcoming year, so get your tickets. All right, can I start class? All right, let's start class. Let's start with offensive speech. So I want to go back to our framework we've used over and over again, these sort of 6 lenses to look at. And I want to focus on number 2, categories. And we've only talked about a handful of these categories. Oh, I've got defamation. Defamation should be on there as well. Right? I'm sorry. I have libel up there. I have libel. We have the fighting words, we have Brandenburg, right? There are certain categories of speech that are just outside the scope of the First Amendment. For much of the 20th century, the court's approach was to sort of slot in these different categories of speech. But as you'll see in the readings today, the court does not want to recognize new categories of speech. For example, in Stevens, the government said there should be a category of speech that's not protected for animal violence. The court said no new category. In Brown, we need a category of unprotected speech for violent video games. No. In NIFLA versus Becerra, they said we want a category of unprotected speech for professional speech. Court said no. So the three cases today, they declined to add new categories to this list. So this category list, I think, is basically fixed. The court, at least the current court, is not going to augment them. All right. All right. Yes, Julianne? Oh, you are such a good person to remind me. Thank you so much. You are on your game. Please, everyone sign to the attendance. Should be running now. There's so few of it. I know you all. I don't even think of doing the attendance. I don't have to. When I first started teaching, I didn't take attendance, and I had students who abused it. And then what happens is they say we want to drop this person because they've not been there, and I don't have any records to prove to drop them. So none of you are doing that. You're all very good students. You're here because you want to be, right? You could have taken another class. No one wants to be here at 9 p.m. except, I guess, the half day. So you're here, I think, by choice. Maybe not. At least one of you is here by choice. I'm not sure. All right. So I always ask this question. Has anyone ever heard of crush films before this class? Why?
Class 5, where you told us what they were.
Before this class, you ever heard of a crush film? Julianne, oh.
That similar act, but with fruit, not with animals.
You know what a crush film is? No?
I used to work at a jail. I have seen defendants charged with production. Yeah,
Really? It's a state or federal prison?
State, county.
Wow. All right. You and social media, we got that last week also with getting takedown for your crochet stuff. I don't. Here, I'll let John Roberts read it. I'm not doing it.
Federal law made it a crime to create, sell, or possess certain depictions of animal cruelty. This law does not prohibit animal cruelty.
By the way, this was the only picture I could find that predicted animal violence that wasn't offensive. Like I spent hours looking for some picture that would not enrage my students, and that's kind of cute, right? But they're fighting, so you're welcome.
Rather,
on this one too.
Trails of certain acts harmful to animals.
I spent a lot of time finding these pictures.
Statute applies to any visual or auditory depiction,
Sing it, John.
such as a picture, video, or sound recording, or in which a living animal is intentionally maimed, mutilated, tortured, wounded, or killed. End quote. If that conduct is illegal where the creation, sale, or possession takes place. Congress exempted from criminal coverage depictions with, quoting again, serious religious, political, scientific, educational, journalistic, historical, or artistic value. The court observed that Congress focused primarily on what are called crush videos, which feature the torture and killing of helpless animals. On appeal, the court.
You'll notice that whenever there's a case involving gross facts, I'll let John Roberts read the facts. So for Snyder versus Phelps, he read the facts. For the crush films, he read the facts. So I don't want to do it. It's better him than me. Yes. What was that? No, seriously. Whenever I teach this case, I get that reaction soon. So I'm sorry, but these are actual human beings who do this stuff. Remember Michael Vick, who was a football player who had the dog fighting? Where is it? I have a picture of Mr. There he is. This is Mr. Where is he? This is Stevens. I didn't actually watch his video.
The entire statute is unconstitutional. Rather,
So this is Mr. Stevens. This is the guy. So sort of the irony is the wrong word, but the rub of this case is that it didn't actually involve a crush film. It involved dogfighting. So the feds prosecuted Mr. Stevens for dogfighting, and I'm sure I don't want to upset Julianne even more, but the facts are gruesome, right? They basically breed these animals to be warriors, and they they abuse them, they torture them, they starve them, they'll execute them, they put gunpowder in their food, right? It's just the most awful things you can think of to make these animals as vicious as possible. They train them not to back down, so that when they're fighting, they keep fighting and fighting. It's gruesome. Okay. So Mr. Stevens was indicted and he was charged with violating the statute. Okay. Now, make something very clear. This is not an animal cruelty statute directly, right? It does not make it a federal offense to engage in dogfighting. It does not make it a federal offense to crush an animal with a shoe or something, right? It only depicts the sharing of the recording and interstate commerce, right? So he could still be prosecuted under state animal cruelty laws for his actions. But imagine if a defendant who didn't actually record the act, who had nothing to do with the act, but he just sold the videos, right? Or someone who had a social media site where he shared these videos online. That's what this statute was going after. It's not the people who engage in the act of cruelty of themselves. It's those who distribute it. And just to give you an analogy, there's a case mentioned called Ferber. Remember that one, Ferber, right? Ferber involved child pornography. And it prohibits distribution of child pornography. And one of the rationales for prohibiting the distribution says, well, so long as there's a market for this stuff, it will be created. So if we ban the distribution, that might dry up the demand for child pornography. So a similar argument was done here, that if we ban the distribution of these crush videos, of these dogfighting videos, it will dry up the marketplace to create them in the first place. Okay. All right, Amy. Let's walk through the court's analysis. How did the federal government try to defend the statute? Stevens,
Sorry, I'm in the wrong case.
the first case, the dog case, not the violence case.
I think I prepared for the wrong class.
Oh, you were at Stanley against Georgia?
Assignment. Okay.
You read about obscenity.
Yes.
Oh, we didn't assign that one this year.
I didn't pay attention to my syllabus and followed the book.
Okay, I can see all the highlights. I believe you actually read it. Unless they're just random highlights that you just like to spook me out. All right. Did you read the video game case?
No, I did not get into assignment 7.
Okay, well, next time. Okay. Jonathan, how did the government defend the crush film case, the crush law?
They contended that whether a given category of speech under the First Amendment protecting the form of
Oh, good. So we often say with Chaplinsky, there are certain categories of speech that are not protected. Did Chaplinsky say why certain categories of speech are not protected?
No, I don't believe it.
What did they say about it? Remember? Anna, do you remember? There are certain categories of speech that are protected for what reason?
Like I think that there's a history.
Yes, tradition. Right? What the court said in Chaplinsky is that there's a tradition, a long-standing tradition of certain categories of speech that are not protected. So something of a historical inquiry, right? Anna, is there any tradition of prohibiting speech about animal violence?
Isn't this what the majority and the dissent argued about?
You tell me. It's not a question. You answer it.
The majority said that there is a history of protecting animals.
Protecting animals.
Animal violence.
Okay, but
I guess the dissent argued that didn't have to do with like filming in.
I think you've inverted it.
Oh.
What did the majority hold? I think you inverted it.
Oh,
who did the majority rule for?
The majority allowed the videos to.
Did the majority uphold the conviction or reverse the conviction?
They. They said that the conviction was invalid.
Good. So, did the majority think that there was a long-standing tradition of banning depictions of animal violence?
So they said no.
That's correct. Good. All right. So, what the court takes is something of a historical approach to the First Amendment. It's not really originalist in any meaningful sense, but it's just sort of based on tradition, right? Tradition, right? Tradition. Okay. There's certain categories that are long familiar to the bar. And they mention obscenity, which Amy read about, right? It's okay. No, right. So what's obscenity? Oh, good. By the way, I had a professor in law school. This is for evidence or Cipro, I can't remember. But a student got called on, and the student said, "I'm sorry, I read the wrong page." And so the professor says, "What page did you read?" And he pulls a page out of thin air. He says, "Oh, really? Oh, you read this case? What's that case about?" He asked him to recite that case. He was full of it. He got called on it. I believe you. You're sorry. That works. You're a good student, 'cause I know you read past. So tell me, what's obscenity?
It's not fully defined.
No, it's not.
But it is things that are contrary to like normal social and moral beliefs and
It appeals to a prurient interest, which means sexual, right? So it's not just, God, I was in trouble with this one. It's not just pornography, it's really bad pornography, right? It's stuff that goes beyond some sort of threshold line. There were actually these cases in the 60s and 70s trying to draw the line between pornography and obscenity. And the Supreme Court actually had a movie theater in the building where they would actually watch the films. So you can imagine all these old white dudes watching these pornos together, deciding what the line was. That was constitutional law in the 1970s. Was that? Justice was it? Justice Harlan was basically blind by that point, and he was just like, he was just listening. Oh God. All right. So yeah, thank you for that, Amy. Exactly right. So obscenity under the Roth case is a long-standing rule of that speech that's banned. We talk about defamation under the Sullivan standard. Another one is fraud, right? You cannot engage in fraud, right? If I lie to you and say, "Here, sign this contract. It's going to get all this great things will happen," I'm lying. That's fraud. I can't claim. Oh no, that's free speech, right? I'm protected. We talk about incitement, which is Brandenburg. Another category which we didn't mention is and just write this one down: speech integral to criminal conduct. Speech that's integral to criminal conduct. So to give you an example, if I give you very clear instructions how to assassinate someone, right? I can't then claim, "Oh, that's my free speech," right? If I tell you, okay, he's landing his plane at this hour, he's going to this hotel, he's in room 1524, knock on the door, then you can shoot him, right? I just engaged in speech, but it's speech that's integral to criminal conduct. Curiously, the court did not list fighting words in that category, but those are the big categories: obscenity, defamation, fraud, incitement, and speech integral to criminal conduct. Now, the government in this case wants to add a new category: depictions of illegal acts of animal cruelty. The court says no. There's a long-standing tradition of banning animal cruelty, but there's no similar tradition of criminalizing depictions of cruelty. See the difference, right? You can ban the cruelty, but there's no tradition of banning the depiction of the cruelty. Now, the government says there's no value here. We need a balancing test. What Jonathan said a minute ago, a balancing test. Adi, what does the majority say about adding a balancing test to the First Amendment?
well, it says no to it, but basically because we're not just gonna. So they said number one, it's not what the precedent is good for. It's
Good.
To see precedent so that they used the balancing test as descriptive. And certain things, but that it wasn't a test that they've ever employed.
Does the court employ hold on, take a step back. What's a balancing test?
They were in this one. It was the interest of the social value of the speech
Versus?
the societal cost.
Good. So a balancing test, you often hear this in maybe other classes. You sort of weigh what is the harm to society from the speech on one side, and the other side you weigh what is the value of the speech, and you sort of do one of these things. Well, how much harm does it cost versus the speech? The government says there's minimal, maybe even zero social value. Nick, how do we decide how much value there is to a particular type of speech?
I guess it's up to the Supreme Court.
Are they our social critics for the world? They decide what's valuable?
That's what it seems like.
Does John Roberts want to do that?
Probably not.
Probably not. What did he say about that?
Well, that's a startling and dangerous path to like.
Darling and dangerous. Roberts is Roberts, for all of his warts, he's pretty solid on free speech. For whatever reason, this really gets his dander up. He really gets it. He wrote the majority in Snyder. He wrote the majority in Stevens, right? So this issue matters to him a lot. Okay. The Chief Justice says it's not the role of the courts to decide the value of speech, because maybe to us normal human beings, this speech is messed up, right? I'm just going to say it. If this is stuff that gets you off, you are messed up, right? There's something wrong with you. I'm sorry if I get a title IX violation, I'll say it. There's something wrong with you, okay? Anyone in the class likes this stuff, just don't tell me. But it's not the role of the government to decide what the case is, right? It's not the government's role to decide this. So this entire idea that you can balance the value of speech is offset against its harm? No. Roberts also says this point, which I think is probably not true, but he says it anyway, that the ratification of the First Amendment actually did the balancing for us, right? He says the framers of the Constitution put this in there. That's the balance. We should protect free speech. The argument doesn't actually do anything because you have to decide what the First Amendment means. But Roberts is like, we're not going to do this balancing game. We're not going to create the startling and dangerous new category of speech, right? Because if the government wins here, every time another case comes to the court, they'll say, oh, here's a new category of unprotected speech, and here's another one and another category. They keep adding all these categories, and before you know it, the First Amendment's hollowed out. You have all these sort of holes like a Swiss cheese, right, where you don't have protections. Adi?
Were they saying that I just got a little confused. Were they saying that the category itself would be like this balancing test kind of thing, or that the categories would be fit by that test? I don't know.
Say your question. I think I missed your question. One more time, please.
Were they trying to say that the
Who's they? The government or the court?
The government itself would, that the category itself would be this specific one.
This specific one, yeah.
Or, so yeah, with my other ones, or that it would that this balancing test was technically some category of speech. But
No. It's that you use a balancing test to decide whether there should be a new category added. In other words, because there's so little redeeming value of this speech, we're going to add a new category. And whenever there's any category of speech that's very harmful with little value, you just add a new category to the list. Now, what Roberts is saying is that list will get really long. Because if we take as judges what we think, as judges think is valueless speech, again, there's a lot of crap on the internet, right? There's a lot of really bad stuff online that some people find valuable. I mean, the fact that people are paying money for these videos of dogfighting, of crush films, shows that they find it useful, that they like it, they enjoy it. They for whatever depraved reasons, they decide to like it. And who the heck are we to judge what other people want to see? It's a very libertarian impulse. Maybe you disagree with it, but I think the court's saying we don't want to be in the business deciding what people want to watch in their spare time. All right, questions so far? Yes, sir.
I don't understand how, like, I got lost in the part where it's saying like the act itself of the animal cruelty, you can ban that, but you can't ban the depiction of it.
Right.
Why don't the abusers just turn around and say, "Oh, this is speech. It's my expression. I can."
Well. Oh, okay. Well, if you asked me a question, let's do it. What's our first question on our list? Is it speech? First question on the list, right? I'm sorry, Julianne. It's putting a high-heeled shoe through a rabbit speech.
And just as much as pornography is.
All right. Well, let's try this again. What kind of speech might putting a high-heeled shoe through a rabbit be on our list? Are there words leaving your mouth? Okay. So under the O'Brien test, what message are you trying to convey by putting by putting a heel through a rabbit?
I have none.
No, you're communicating. Look, they're communicating based on sort of sexual idea, right?
Yeah.
So then you ask under the O'Brien test, is the government's interest in banning crushing bunny rabbits related to trying to suppress the message you're conveying?
I guess that's no. I guess the.
So putting a high heel shoe through a bunny rabbit is not expressive conduct under the O'Brien test. Look, you can approach this as a lawyer or just say, oh, this is gross, but work through your test, right? You have these tests. This is not like a burning of a draft card, right? The government's interest with the draft card burning was to make sure the hippies didn't burn the draft cards. The reason why you ban animal cruelty is to not prevent animals from being destroyed by these depraved individuals, right? But yeah, it's our first question on the list. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have so many questions. So.
I know. I'm
how-
sorry.
So how does it work with obscenity then? Because I know we didn't read obscenity.
It's a question for Amy.
Obscenity is expressive conduct and then. It's all.
Oh, okay. I mean, look. So I thought he was going there. He didn't. Now you're of course following up on it. The act of engaging in sexual relations on camera is protected speech, right? And it's protected unless it crosses a line into obscenity. So you might ask, wait a minute, Josh, why is obscenity banned, but not depictions of animal cruelty?
Which have like which are supposed to have some kind of obscene message.
So this goes back to Jonathan's point before, actually Anna's question a minute ago. The answer is that a lot of these obscenity tests were created at a time where the court just made stuff up. And it's frankly hard to reconcile the obscenity doctrine with other things. Because why they say you can ban obscenity but not pornography. The truth is, and you may not like this, the state probably has the power to ban all the above, right? If we take the idea that you can ban obscenity, then we're drawing an arbitrary line between what is too, basically gross, and who the heck are judges to decide what's too gross? So maybe it's all in or all out. In other words, you can't ban any of it, or you can ban all of it. But the obscenity test is very much a balancing test. It's also based on community standard, and this is actually true. When the Bush administration brought obscenity prosecutions, they brought the lawsuits in Utah, which is, God bless Utah, one of those conservative states in the union, socially conservative at least, right? So it's based on the local standards of your place. If you brought the suit, New York or San Francisco, might be a different outcome. So obscenity doctrine, and actually it's one of the reasons I skipped it. I'm sorry, Amy, keep coming back to you. I skipped it because it doesn't fit in with modern doctrine. It doesn't. So I gave up on it.
So, maybe this answer would be, or maybe I would have an answer if we read that, but why then did the government not try to argue that this was obscenity?
Because obscenity, so here's a problem. Obscenity, as Amy will tell you, refers to appealing to your sexual interests. It's basically about arousal. That's what I do in combo class, right? These dogfighting videos were not sexual in nature. Had they actually had a crush film video, it would have been easier to say this is obscenity, which is probably why the government didn't bring that case, right? They're separate statutes to prosecute obscenity. Those have been upheld for decades. But the only way they can get at Mr. Stevens is through this animal cruelty law, which is not about sexual. Again, these are dogfights. Maybe people find these sexually gratifying, but mostly it's just appealing to people's sense of violence and gore and blood loss, right? I'm sorry.
Because of
This was not sexual in nature. Yeah. Go on.
How do we show the line between what's of artistic value and what's?
Oh, what a good question. So there's a savings clause in the statute. Everyone know what I see when you say savings clause? It's an exception clause, right? Hold on, let me bring it up. So this statute accepts from prohibition religious, political, scientific, educational, journalistic, historical, or artistic value. So if your speech fits in any of those categories, you can't be prosecuted, right? But how does Roberts respond to this, right? A lot of hunting videos might have some educational value. Maybe a bullfighting video has historical value, but not necessarily. Anyone a hunter here? Do you ever watch hunting videos? A lot of them? Do you watch them for educational reasons? Be honest.
Sometimes.
Why else might?
I mean, sometimes just for fun,
Yeah, why else might you want to watch a hunting video?
thrill of the hunt.
Yeah, thrill the hunt. It's fun. Aaron, same?
Yeah, a lot of them have pretty good advice, like you can learn a lot.
Or it's just fun to watch. So what Roberts is saying is trying to say we're saving it for these specific categories isn't enough because someone might just like it because it makes them excited. They enjoy it. It's a thrill of the hunt, right? Or they might like seeing gore, like someone covered head to toe in blood. They have those videos, right?
I guess.
I have a professor friend who went feral pig hunting with basically a crossbow. I mean, like Lord of the Flies stuff, right? And he's basically covered head to toe in blood. He likes it. Well, who am I to judge, right? Maybe I'm to judge, right? But who am I? Yes, I stand here laughing, but I don't hunt. I'm sorry. Justice Scalia took Justice Kagan hunting her first term in the court because she actually tried to make an effort to make friends with the conservatives, and Scalia took him. They went, was it pheasant hunting? And she enjoyed it actually. It's cool, right? Yeah. She actually she showed up. She did it. I don't do hunting. Okay. All right. So in any way, the court's saying we're not going to allow the sort of balancing historical, right? What about prosecutorial discretion? Who am I up to? Cody or Dylan? Yeah. What's the idea? Robert seems very annoyed at this argument. He just seems actually like almost insulted by this one.
Yeah, it's like, they just don't trust the government to do it.
What did the government say? Had the government trying to assure the court this will not be bad? The government made like a promises.
Oh, only to reach the extreme cruelty.
Yeah, they said this is great. It's like the government says, trust us, right? We'll only bring this for really bad people. And Roberts is like,
They're like proving themselves right now by bringing.
bingo, perfect answer. Roberts says, give me a break, you guys. You didn't bring this against the crazy. You brought this against not the Crush Holmes, you brought this the dog guy, right? I don't trust you. And Scalia would always make this point. He says, it's not. Oh, do I have that clip here? I think it's in the video, right? The Scalia clip. I think it's the Scalia. No, where's Scalia? Maybe a different one. But there's a Scalia quote. Maybe it's in a different case. I'm blanking on it. Where Scalia says, "It's not our job to narrow statute." It's in the Brown case. Okay. Yeah, it's in the next case. That's where it was. Right? It's not our job to narrow statutes. The government can't come in and promise to enforce it reasonably. We don't trust you. And this is not civil. This is criminal. This is what we go to jail for. This is a big deal. Okay. What about the obscenity test? Miller. This is one that our good friend Amy read today. This is not obscenity. It doesn't appeal to the sexual arousal and so on. Okay. I've taught this class before, and I've had students bring their kids to class, and I'm just dropping F-bombs and stuff like, I'm sorry, bring your kid here. It's fair game. So thank you for being mature. Okay. All right, let's go to the dissent, the Alito dissent. And Alito is the most traditional member of the court, at least at this time. I think he still is. And he dissented in Snyder against Phelps. He dissented alone. He dissented alone in this case, in Stevens. And he also wrote a partial dissent in the video game case as well. So in the span of a couple of years, he wrote some very significant First Amendment dissents. Dylan, what does Alito say in his dissent?
So we talked about how this type of entertainment has no social value. Then he goes into like the criminal conduct aspect of it, violent criminal conduct.
Does Alito want to recognize a new category of unprotected speech? Does he get into the categorical approach?
No, he compared it to the Ferber case.
Okay, good. Which one was Ferber again? Just remind us, please.
Child.
Right, yeah, pornography. So the idea in Ferber was this. In order to drive down the actual abuse of children, we're going to ban its distribution. Because if you can't sell it, you're less likely to report it. Because always the underlying act of child abuse is illegal. And by the same token, the act of animal abuse is illegal in all 50 states. So Dylan, how does then Alito sort of put that together? How would Alito approach this case?
Like applying the statute like this is like a pragmatic way to try to fight these.
Yes, right. This basically drives up the effects. So something called the secondary effect doctrine. You'll see this in some of the cases. So the classic example is, can you ban a strip club? And the court says no, because that's speech. Okay. What if you say that pardon the French, people hang out outside strip clubs are not the best people, right? It often associates crime, drugs, and so on. Can you ban the strip club as a way to get at the secondary effect, that is the sort of the hanger-ons who hang outside the strip club, that you might get away with? So the court will often say, you can't necessarily ban the speech, but you can ban the stuff around the speech to try and dry up the demand. So you can ban loitering around a strip club, for example. So this is an example where Alito says, one way to help dry up the supply of, dry up the demand for animal cruelty is to ban the depiction of these videos. Okay? Yeah, this is a classic Alito dissent. He gets very, I think he has a dog. I'm just guessing. I think he does. But you could tell this case very, very bothers him. Robert's part son of a dog. I don't know. Yeah.
This doesn't matter. Who nominated it? Again?
George W. Bush. It's not his first pick. As the story goes, in 2005, what a year. You guys were alive yet? I think you were. Oh God, that's right. I was in college. I'm old. I remember when I was young. You'll be old one day, I promise. It will happen to you all, God willing. If you're not old, then it's bad. Means you didn't get there. But in 2005, George Bush had just started his second term, and Sandra Day O'Connor announced she was stepping down. And then shortly thereafter, Bush nominates John Roberts to fill the O'Connor seat. But then in September of 2005, Chief Justice Rehnquist dies. Rehnquist dies suddenly. And then George Bush, in one of his most important decisions, like I'll do with Iraq, says, aha, I'm going to elevate John Roberts, who'd been a federal judge for like 3 years, to be Chief Justice. In hindsight, he actually made the right call. The other ones were even worse. So of the people who were in the candidates, Roberts was the best. God, other ones, Michael Ludig, train wreck would have been. Wilkinson, bad. So Bush made the right call. But then to fill the O'Connor seat, who did Bush nominate? His White House counsel, Harriet Miers. You even know that name? Good, you shouldn't, right? But she almost became a Supreme Court justice. She was Bush's private lawyer. She was a lawyer up in Dallas. Had no experience living in constitutional law, had no background as a judge. He basically picked his crony to be a Supreme Court justice. And there was an outrage. Conservatives rebelled. They said, what, are you insane? You're wasting this on Miers? And eventually, either Miers withdrew or Bush told her to withdraw. I think she basically withdrew. And then Bush tapped Sam Alito to be Associate Justice. So in the span of a couple months, we got 2 new justices to the court. Before this, the court had been the same since 1994. Breyer was confirmed in 94. And between 94 and 2005, the court was stagnant, no new members. Now we're getting new members in a fairly regular clip. It's actually hard to get a cohesive thing. And by the way, don't be surprised if Sotomayor retires this year. I would not be surprised. She's giving speeches. She's getting tired. She's getting frustrated. I think she's sticking with Biden. She wants to go. So we might get another nomination this summer. It's a Democratic Senate. It's going to be easy for her. Her health is not the best. Would not be surprised if she steps down. I mean, we just have basically boom, 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 boom. Right? Just seriously, for 11 years, we had a static court, and now every 2 or 3 years, another nomination. Thomas lives to 100. He's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. Alito might retire in the Republican administration if Trump wins. I think Sotomayor those might call it quits in a few months, but we'll see. If I'm right, you'll say Blackman told me. If I'm wrong, then you'll forget. All right. Questions? Yes, Adi.
With the analogy to the strip club example,
I love this class. Yeah, go on.
That
you can't relegate the content. In other words, you can't prohibit the naked dancing, but you can sort of prohibit the stuff that comes around it. So, loitering around the strip club and like.
But I'm confused how that's identical or like sufficiently analogous to this, because this would be technically regulating, if Alito thinks it's okay to regulate the speech, he would be technically regulating the speech.
Well, right. It's not a good analogy because you can ban the cruelty, right? The difference is the cruelty itself is criminal, but it's a depiction of the cruelty that you cannot ban. With the strip club, it's the stripping that's protected, and it's the other stuff that you can ban. It's almost a mirror image of the strip club case.
Can you film yourself murdered?
I mean, you can, and that will be evidenced in your conviction. The better example is if you're the son of Sam and you kill people, can you write a book and profit off of your crime? There's actually a case. It's Simon and Schuster versus someone, where there was a New York law that banned profiting off a crime you committed. It's called Simon and Schuster. What's the actual name of the case? Not so Simon Sam, Simon and Schuster. What's the name of that case? Yeah. Simon Schuster versus members of New York State Crime Victim Board from 1991, and that involves whether a law that bans, what do you call it? Profiting off of it. And the court said that yes, that this was unconstitutional, that you can't prohibit people from profiting off their crime. So even that you can't do. The court's pretty pro free speech as a matter of law.
But they said, in the opinion, they said we've already judged that taking a profit out of a crime is a compelling interest. But I guess they were just saying.
Yes, it's compelling interest, but this law, I don't have all the details in front of me, but this law was not narrowly tailored enough. So there was a compelling interest. All right. Everyone knows who Son of Sam is? He was a guy who killed a lot of people. His dog. See, dogs. What's wrong with dogs? All right, let's do the next case. Go on. Oh, Jacob, you're up next. Did you do the reading? With a baby. I'm impressed. All right, good. Give me the facts, please, in Brown v. MA. These facts are not gruesome.
Yeah, no. California passed law prohibiting the sale of violent video games to minors.
Oh, not just prohibiting. What could minors have access to these games?
They could,
How?
if their parents allowed them,
Parents or
whoever was with them, and they allowed it.
guardian and uncle, right? Okay, so again, it didn't actually ban the sale of these games. It didn't regulate the content of these games. All the law did was said that if a minor goes to a store like Target or whatever, Best Buy, and they want to buy a game that's rated M, more or less mature, they must have a parent or guardian purchase it. So Jacob, how is this even a First Amendment case? In other words, they're not regulating the content of the game, not regulating the viewpoint of the game. They're just regulating a simple commercial transaction. Is this like Lochner? Why is there even a First Amendment issue here? Where's the First Amendment issue?
Because it imposed the restriction on the content.
The video game was not changed. No one's regulating what's in the video game. They can sell whatever they want, just not to kids. Shania, where's the First Amendment issue here?
The packaging as like 18 plus.
So is this a lot about packaging? Is that the First Amendment issue, that it's unconstitutional to put a label on your product?
Does it have to do with them basically altering their speech by imposing a
But they don't have to alter the video game. They put a label on the front cover. What's the big deal? I don't see, where's the First Amendment issue here?
Does it have to do with the language in the law that talks about, like, if a reasonable person would find the game?
Now we're getting closer. Okay. So what this case is not about, this is not about regulating video games, the content, right? Nothing's being changed. It's not really even about the label, because lots of products have labels on them, right? You go to buy a pack of cigarettes and they've actually done it, but there's, so you gotta be, it's 21 now, right? They raised it to 21? What do I know? Right? You have to be 21. Right? Lots of products. You buy any pharmaceutical, there's like a million warnings in the bottle, right? The issue instead, as Shania explained to us, has to do with how these ratings are imposed. The ratings are imposed not based on some sort of objective, you have to be 21 years old. It's based on the content of the game. Right? Kevin, what sort of content in the video game triggers this special type of a warning?
They actually explicitly state
Oh, they do.
Killing.
Thank you.
Yeah, killing, maiming, dismembering, or sexually assaulting the image of a human being.
Okay, so one more time. Killing, maiming, dismembering,
or sexually assaulting an image of a human being.
Is maiming and dismembering the same thing? Isn't maim to dismember, to chop off a limb?
Maiming still be alive.
But dismember is remove a limb. Isn't maiming dismembering the same? I don't know. Whatever. Surplusage, right? You've given it some thought. All right. Okay. This is a fun class, right? Loss of limbs. All right. Whatever. Life or limb. It's in the It's actually the Bill of Rights. Loss of life or limb. Right. You can execute something for loss of life or limb. Thank you for that, Kevin. So again, the problem with the statute is it triggers these warnings based on the content of the game. But Eric, we've sort of leaped over the issue. Whose speech rights are being violated here? Is it the speech rights of the video game manufacturers?
Of the distributors.
Is it the speech rights of the distributors? How is their speech being violated? In other words, whose speech rights are being violated here? Whose speech rights are being violated here?
Yes, creators too.
How? How is their speech rights being violated? No one's changing their game. No one's telling them what they can't sell. How does adding a warning on the game violate their speech rights? Jamar, whose speech rights are being violated here?
I guess the children,
The children. How are the children's speech rights being violated here?
because the parents want to restrict, or I guess the government wants to restrict what child gets to hear what and what actually gets to see.
You're right. It's not the right of the content provider. It's not the right of the video game manufacturer. It's the right of the children. Won't someone please think of Helen Lovejoy, right? Please think of the children. Someone watches Simpsons, I can tell. Someone please think of the children, right? Now, this raises a question, Aaron. Do children, minors under the age of 18, have free speech rights? If you're 18 or over, you get whatever video game you want. Your rights not being violated. This law is only triggered by the under the age of 18. Do kids under the age of 18 have First Amendment rights? I have to tell this to your daughter, right? Does Jacob's 1 week old daughter have free speech rights?
I was gonna say my 4-year-old exercises it very freely.
You can censor her. You have power.
Got the hot water, and I've tried. But I would think.
Go on. Kid's not here.
I would say no.
But what does the majority say? What does Scalia say? Scalia had nine children. I mean, it's basically a baseball team. Like, what does Scalia say? Do children have First Amendment rights?
I thought it was more about the rights of the parents.
Mm-mm. Joanne?
I think based on the majority, they're recognizing that the children
And a First Amendment right to what?
to
To what? What's the exact right that the court's protecting here?
I guess the best way to articulate it is the right to literature in whatever form it comes.
It's to speak,
It's more to digest.
receive. Bingo. Perfect. The right at issue here is not the right to speak. There are lots of cases about the right to speak. So, for example, I don't want to sign it, but Tinker versus Des Moines School District. You ever heard of this case? It's right of a student to wear a black armband in class to protest the war. Right? It's a form of expressive symbolic speech. So as long as there's not causing a big disruption, public school students have a right to wear a black armband in school to protest speech. But this case is not about the right of students to speak. I mean, maybe when they buy a video game, they can speak over over a multiplayer game, whatever, on the microphone. That's not what we're talking about here. It's the right to receive information. And this is an important point. The First Amendment is a two-way street. It's the right to communicate, but also the right to receive information. So if I'm giving a speech and you start protesting me, it's happened before, right? I'm giving a speech and you're protesting me. They're violating my right to speech, but also violating your right to listen. It's a two-way street. So what Scalia is saying here is the video game people have the right to make the game and they can sell it, but it's also the right of the children to receive that information, to play it. And this law burdens the ability of children to receive that information. So that's actually the nature of the right. That's the nature of this right. It's the right of the kids to receive information. So again, the law burdens the First Amendment because we're imposing these sort of restrictions on what's reasonable, content-based, maiming, dismembering, whatever, right? But it's the right, whose rights being violated? Whose right? The rights of the kids. It's a weird case, right? I don't know if you all got this in your first read. Every year I teach that, I actually have some trouble with it. Sort of pinpoint what the actual nature of the right is. Now, Justice Thomas comes in. Brian, what does Justice Thomas say about the rights of the children? Does he think kids have rights?
He said that people don't have the right to speak to another child's parents without their commitment.
Yeah, that's right. Thomas says there's no right to speak to a child unless you go through their parents. Do you have kids?
Yes,
Do you agree with that statement?
yes.
Yes. Anyone with kids disagree with that statement? Yeah. So I'm same. So again, now that's not a matter of constitutional law, but it's a matter of just preference. The government has no right to speak to my kids unless I so consent. Right? I think every parent's nodding their head yes. The problem for Justice Thomas is there's not much authority for that proposition. It's something that every parent knows is true, but it's never had to be said before. He's like, it's a point that's so obvious it doesn't have to be said out loud, right? That there's no affirmative right to have to speak to someone's children without going through the parent first, right? When you give a child to a public school, whatever else, you're basically giving them the limited right to teach and so on, but through our consent and so on. Okay. Scalia says to Thomas, "That's nice, Clarence. You have no proof." Basically, you have no cases you can cite. He really has nothing. I mean, you read. It's not. We didn't take it out of your book. There's nothing there. But Thomas thinks articulating what probably every parent in the world knows, at least every parent in America knows, but was never recognized because there had never before been a case of a child's right to receive speech that the parents do not consent to. Even in the Tinker case, the parents supported the black armband wearing. In fact, I think most of the time the parents were pushing the kids to engage in this sort of speech. I don't know whenever you see kids at these political rallies, they're there because they want to be there. Their parents are just nudging them. Right? The parents just pushing them to do it. They're very cute, pawing people up there and speak for things. Okay. All right. What about obscenity? Leighton, we talked about the Ginsburg case, right? This is a case that bans the sale of girly magazines to minors. So it was a New York case. Under the age of 18, you can't buy, Playboy, right? You know what this is? These were magazines before the internet, right? They existed. People get pornography in paper form. Why can you ban the sale of girly magazines with naked women in them, but you can't ban the sale of video games showing, naked people and like sexual assault? What does Scalia say about that?
Wilson says that was more on the obscene line. This is not really obscene.
Okay, so this goes back to Amy reading, which I did not assign. Maybe I should have actually. The court's basically saying obscenity is different, and this is why I actually don't assign anymore. The court's saying whatever the obscenity case is, we're just not going to talk about it. Obscenity for minors is different. This is not obscene. If these violent video games were in fact obscene, they could be banned. But the statute's not just about obscenity; it sweeps much more broadly. It affects violence, right? And under Stevens, is a depiction of violence obscene? No. Obscenity refers to arousal, sexual, and so on. So because this is much broader in scope, the statute fails. This again is the overbreadth doctrine, right? If a statute might be constitutional in a couple of regards, but sweeps a lot of protected speech, the statute still fails. This is not an as-applied challenge. This is a facial challenge, right? And under a facial challenge, this statute sweeps far too broadly. This came up in actually today's argument quite a bit. What about creating a new category for speech directed at children? Scalia says, no, we are not going to do this. And this is a part of the opinion that Scalia enjoyed writing. He goes through the history of literature and talks about Dante, Grimm's fairy tales, right? Lord of the Flies. Scalia's his father was a classic professor, so you can tell he really enjoyed writing this part of the opinion. Where is it? I have it up here somewhere. He really enjoyed writing this part of the opinion. Maiming and so on. By the way, for a shovel, I had a guillotine, a gun, I had all these different imagery to try and depict it. Okay. Alito responds that video games are different. Anyone here really like video games? I don't. I hate them. I have bad hand-eye coordination. Nick, are violent video games different than violent books?
Not really.
Really? Okay, that's good. Tell me why you say that. So if you read a very gory book, so who do you agree with, Scalia?
I agree with the court whenever they say that it's just the interactive. There's still books, that are interactive. And
Yeah, but choose your own adventure books are different than the most violent video game you can find. I don't know. What's the most violent video game you played?
probably.
Grand Theft Auto. What makes that so? Maybe I should ask.
Oh, I mean, it just you can do whatever you want. It's
Never mind.
It is a lot.
And you see that as comparable to like a book that you choose your own adventure. There's no difference.
Well, because when it comes to like literature and books, I mean, it's your imagination.
Mm.
So, I mean, to an extent, reading that type of literature could be more.
Oh, that's interesting. Julianne, what do you think?
I was gonna start saying most violent video games played as Mortal Kombat.
That came up in the argument. Actually, they mentioned Mortal Kombat in the case.
I think looking at how violence is depicted in that game versus how it's depicted in like the Lord of the Flies, there's a pretty big difference. Because on one hand, you're literally seeing like somebody's spine be ripped out of their body, whereas on the other hand, your imagination is limited to what you've actually seen. You can't imagine something new necessarily.
Oh, that's interesting to look at it.
Graphic violence that is actually depicted.
Oh, that's curious. Cody, you wanna?
I was gonna say like the little bit of time I have spent on video games, the physical effect it has on your body, like your blood pressure, your heart rate, like your mental state is completely different. Like reading Dante's Inferno is a very like mentally bearing book to read, but whenever I put the book down, the book was down. Like I was like,
Oh, so it gives you the jitters afterwards?
yeah, but like no, you don't get the jitters after like
Yeah.
a video game.
And Dylan? And then
I know it wasn't out yet, but I'm just thinking like video games. If you throw virtual reality in there, there's virtual reality video games.
VR headset, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that has to like completely change things.
Put an Oculus or something.
We talked about that at one point. Like
Yeah, Alito was talking about VR. Yeah, Aaron.
I don't know if anyone's ever been Chuck Palahniuk, but people like it's pretty widely known that people are known to faint or get
By reading a book?
at his book reading because of how descriptive it is.
I think my students have fainted by my class. No, I'm just kidding. So again, I don't know, and Justice Breyer speaks this also. With Justice Breyer says, like Breyer's wife was a child psychologist, so you know where he's coming from in this case. She's actually British royalty. He married to British royalty. It's true. Joanna Breyer. No, I think actually she a baroness. That's why I said baron. She actually a baroness. You can Google me on that one. But I think she has some title of nobility. She's a psychologist. And Breyer said, we don't know the effect of these video games on children. We're just judges, right? We're just judges here. Shouldn't we defer to the legislature, which has done studies and held hearings on this? And aren't the elected branches more responsible to know what should be portrayed to children? Right? This is Breyer's MO. He's always about deference to those who have more authority. And he doesn't want to be a judge second guessing the government. You'll see this also in the NIFLA case. He was just livid in that case. Yeah, Amy?
Pick them up and sexually assault them.
Has what?
Hookers.
Oh, that's what you said. Okay.
Do that. So that to me would fall. But is it because I look at the game as a whole?
Yeah, prurient interest as a whole, there's still redeeming value. Wasn't Lindsay Lohan in one of the Grand Theft Auto games? They depicted her in the cover and she sued under copyright. Yeah, there was a GTA cover where the girl looked just like Lindsay Lohan. Yeah, and it was a girl going like this with a peace sign, looked just like Lindsay Lohan. She actually sued, saying that was me. Anyway, yeah. So there's literary value.
I drew the line with video games with my kids. The violence, fine.
I drew the line at Mario Brothers. I haven't played video games in a very long time. Mario Brothers 3. That's about as far as I went. What? I don't have good coordination, so I was never good at those games. I just can't like the buttons. Not for me. can do puzzles. Okay, my daughter loves puzzles. All right. So in other words, the court's not going to create a new category. This is just like literature. Okay. Video games, he says, are not different. Maybe Nick and Nino would go play some games together. So then we get to our framework, right? We have speech. It's expressive. Doesn't fit into a category. So what kind of scrutiny to apply? Who am I up to? I don't know who I'm up to. Oh, Amy, no, you. Jonathan. So because we have speech, doesn't fit into one of the categories, how do we review the law? What type of review do we give? What's our third step in our framework? What kind of regulation is it? Well, is it viewpoint or content? You tell me. Okay. What's the content-based restriction? Anna, what's a content-based restriction? Amy, want to do it?
I was going to say the 18 and under.
Close. Good for not reading the case. Yeah. Good guess. Anna, what's the content-based restriction? What triggers the rating, Anna?
The violence.
What kind of violence? Oh, he stepped out. What kind of violence? Specifically.
Violent, like kid violence.
Maiming, kidnapping, raping, and so on, right? It's these specific categories that trigger the regulation. Okay. There's also the problem of the interest, right? Adi, does this law actually solve the problem they're trying to solve according to the court?
No, they said it was over. Was it? I guess overbroad.
Over-inclusive.
Over-inclusive.
This is actually important. Thank you for bringing this up. So I'll come back to you in a second, Adi. There are these two concepts in First Amendment doctrine that come up a lot. In fact, we saw this in the NIFLA case as well. Over-inclusive and under-inclusive. And when you're dealing with strict scrutiny, we talk about narrow tailoring, right? Narrow tailoring means you have a law that addresses a problem very carefully and doesn't sweep in too much speech, right? But also it covers the problem you're trying to cover. So in other words, like Goldilocks, right? It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. And this is what narrow tailoring gets at, and over-inclusiveness and under-inclusiveness, right? So let's talk about over-inclusiveness. Okay. What's the argument for over-inclusiveness? There are going to be some parents who want their kids having these games, right? In other words, parents may have decided that these games are not a big deal. Maybe like Nick's parents, right?
I'm not letting my kid play GTA.
Oh, look at this! Look at this!
He's older.
Oh man, look at this! I love it! I love it! I love it! I love it! Jacob, you learn. Do as I say, not as I do. This one comes quick, right? So the idea of over-inclusiveness, right, is there's some parents who will want their kids to have it, yet still punishes those parents. Okay. What about under-inclusiveness? Okay. Go ahead.
Under-inclusive because.
So, I'll give it to you. It's under-inclusive because it only targets video games. Does it target movies? Right? Does it target literature? Does it target anything else? Only video games. So we say this law is not narrowly tailored. Why? It's over-inclusive. It sweeps way too broadly. It sweeps in all parents, whether they want this or not. It's also under-inclusive. If violence is so bad, why aren't you make it a crime to let a person to a rated R movie? Right? I mean, you go watch The Matrix or something, right? Which is a movie came out around that time. I loved that movie when I was in high school, right? Probably you weren't even born when it came out, right? If you're so serious about child violence, you ban The Matrix. You ban Marilyn Manson. This was a thing back in the 90s, right? You ban, yeah, right? You remember this? You ban the stuff, but they've only targeted video games. And they've not shown a good enough fit between the means and the ends. So Scalia says this cannot survive strict scrutiny. Yeah, Cody.
If that's the case, then why is a minor allowed to buy a violent video game?
I knew you were going to ask me the question.
Can't go watch a rated R movie.
Is it a crime for a minor to watch a rated R movie? You know why? It's voluntary. You know, they always see the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, right? That's a voluntary organization. When a movie theater puts the ratings on a theater, on a movie, they're not required to. It's optional. What makes this law different is it's mandatory. If they fail, if Target or Best Buy fails to, it's actually an offense. They can be fined. So the difference is the movie rating system is not compelled by law. It's optional. This is compelled by law, so it's different. Same for video games. Rated M for mature, right? That's all voluntary. They're not required to do that. It's based on a voluntary industry group.
I feel like there's something kind of interesting with how this is, like it's over inclusive because it makes it parents to let their children do that.
Yeah.
But they also were saying like there's no basis for what Chris's comment was saying with parents
Good
having
point.
the right to.
Good point. Right. Yeah. So they're acknowledging that parents should have control over their kids, what speech their kids get.
Think just as long as you're wrong.
Fair point. Fair point. Yeah, they are intentioned. Also, the law doesn't distinguish between a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 17-year-old. That's probably also a bit over-inclusive as well, right? If you're a 7-year-old buying GTA, it's probably a very bad thing. If you're 17, you can basically join the military at that point, right? There's a lot of things that you can do. The age is flat line under 18. Yes, Julianne.
So something that this case made me think about is how there are some bodies of government that are trying to do book bans.
Yes. Yes.
With this case specifically, making the argument of how the law that was constructively over-inclusive and under-inclusive, how does that not also apply to the book bans that are now being used?
So to be fair, they're not actually book bans. What there are is regulations on the books that public schools can give to students. And that's actually very different. So no one's banning what books can be sold in a store. Instead, it's saying if you're a public school, you can't put these books on the shelves. And it's not really a First Amendment issue because schools have very broad discretion of what books they can offer. Now, there was a Texas law that actually got enjoined by a district court. In fact, one of my students was a law clerk who was on that case just about an hour ago. What Texas said was, if you are selling books to a school, you must review these books before you sell them. In other words, you must basically stipulate that there's no inappropriate conduct. And a few bookstores sued, saying that we don't want to take on this burden. It's compelled speech. It's a violation of our speech rights. And a district court enjoined it. We'll see what happens in the Fifth Circuit. Judge Ho made a comment saying under Ferber that the government should be allowed to do this to prevent children from seeing obscene material. All right. So TBD on that one, but they're not straight book bans. It's kind of a media point. Did that help you with the question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, Alito found the law was unconstitutional, but he was sort of clenching his jaw on this one. He was not happy. Who am I up to next? I can't remember. Yeah, Nick, give me the Alito concurrence, please. It's a concurrence in the judgment, meaning he doesn't really agree with the majority. He's not with Scalia on this one, but he and Roberts said that the California law can't survive in its present form.
I think we were talking about deferring like judgment to the legislation in a sense.
Okay, but in particular, why did Alito think the statute was unconstitutional? What about it bothered him? What specific aspect of the law bothered him?
Is it like the lack of notice?
Good. What's that concept called in the first? It's actually almost a due process concept, but also it's due process / First Amendment. What's that doctrine called? Anyone know? Cody?
Completely done that.
Talk about the chilling effect.
Not chilling. Jacob? Shania?
Aerospecificity?
No. What is Alito? What's the doctrine that Alito says is violated? I'll come back to it for you.
Oh, is it the vagueness?
Vagueness. There you go. Got it. Void for vagueness. You hear this before?
Yeah.
So this is a doctrine that appears in the First Amendment, also appears in the Due Process Clause. When the government wants to prohibit activity, they must make it clear what's being prohibited. You can't be left guessing at the law. Scalia would always tell the story of the Roman emperor, I think it was Caligula or Nero, I always forget which one, who would put the laws in these very tall columns. Julianne, you got the reference? The laws on top of the tall columns? Which book is that from? Harry Potter.
Oh, I never read the Harry Potter.
I thought you did the Harry Potter thing, no?
I mean, I do like Harry Potter.
I'm sorry, okay, anyway. So this was actually parodied in the Harry Potter series, where you had what was her name? The woman who took over the school. Yeah, Miss Umbridge. She put all the laws and the rules on top of these tall columns so no one could see them. So the rules were public, but no one could see them. It's a very basic tenet of our legal system that you must know what the laws are. So a law that's too vague, we say it's void for vagueness under the due process clause. Alito incorporates that to this case. It's not really even a First Amendment case. More of it was a due process case that the statute does not really define what violent video games are. So what triggers all these laws is a vague term that's based on this concept discrimination. So you wouldn't go down the majority's road. He'd say that, look, this statute is drafted is not good, but maybe you can fix it. So Alito would actually allow them to repair it. But Alito also says we have to exercise caution. We have these new video games. They're going to mess with people's heads, make their blood race, their pulse throb, and we're going to have this entire generation of zombie bases. Actually, these are you, right? So who are minors in 2010? You all. So I guess you turned out okay, right? No? Yeah, it's messed up. I don't know, right? Yeah, I don't even let my kids touch tablets. It scares the crap out of me. This stuff. What happened? First kid 2011?
I had my first kid in 2011.
Well, this case was 2010, so there you go. All right, so you are the child. By the way, the case was actually originally called Schwarzenegger versus EMA, because Arnold was still governor when this case was argued, but then Jerry Brown had to ruin it by becoming governor again in the middle of the case. So he served like 20 years apart in the governor's mansion. Okay. All right, so we have, and again, so we did Thomas and Breyer. Again, Breyer is just very, very much upset of second guessing anything to do with legislation. He says we need to differential. All right, so again, just sort of to summarize, in Stevens and Schwarzenegger, Stevens and Brown, the EMA, we are not recognizing new categories of speech. Both cases were content-based restrictions. In both cases, they were not narrowly tailored. In both cases, the laws were unconstitutional. So these cases were decided in the span of 2 years, or actually about a year apart from each other. I remember them well. I think I graduated law school in 2009, and Stevens was 10, and then EMA was 11. So basically, it was back to back. These two huge First Amendment cases, which are really signal the tenor where the Roberts Court's heading on free speech. All right? Good? All righty. So now we'll talk about commercial speech. Did anyone accidentally read the commercial speech cases? No? I didn't assign them quite deliberately. So in the 1970s and 80s, there were a number of cases about so-called commercial speech. And what the court said is speech of a commercial nature is subject to a reduced level of scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny. I'm just going to lecture here. I didn't assign it because they don't really matter anymore. One case was from 1976. It's in your book. Virginia State Board of Pharmacy versus Virginia Citizens Consumer Council. It's Virginia State Board of Pharmacy versus Virginia Citizens Consumer Council. And this court says that the mere fact that you're speaking through a corporation makes it basically less valuable. It's kind of like intermediate scrutiny, okay? And the next case, which comes up a lot, is called Central Hudson Gas and Electric versus Public Services Commission. Central Hudson Gas and Electric versus Public Service Commission. And it creates this 4-part test, which you don't have to memorize, which says when are you engaging in commercial speech versus when are you engaging in private speech, right? Don't bother memorizing it, I don't care, right? What's significant about Central Hudson is it was a dissent by Justice Rehnquist. And he said, this is Lochner. This is Lochnerism, right? We are using the First Amendment as a ruse to strike down regulations, right? These are all corporations seeking protection for their commercial activity, and we should not be using the free speech clause of the First Amendment to strike it down. He's very much for Lochner. I want you to just contrast how Rehnquist was so afraid of Lochner with Citizens United. We have a constitutional right of a corporation to fund electioneering. This is why Citizens United made people so upset, because basically reversed, not 100 years of precedent, as Obama had said, but at least decades of precedent that corporations don't have these speech rights, that they're lesser speech rights. Okay? I want to talk about today's case, NIFLA, which is the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, NIFLA versus the chair. Okay? You zoned back in?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, welcome back, sir. We missed you. It was a good trip. All right. So California enacts a law regulating both licensed and unlicensed clinics. Okay, talk about the licensed clinics first. What was the California law? What did it actually require?
It requires the license clinic to notify.
But license, what kind of clinics are we talking about here?
These are clinics that are providing services to pregnant women.
What kind of services to pregnant women? 'Cause that matters actually.
Neonatal care.
Do they provide abortions? They do not. They're what? They are. They're pro-life, very much so. Okay, so I'll come back to you in a second. So these are clinics often called crisis pregnancy centers, right? And they do the opposite of abortion clinics. They try to counsel women to encourage them to keep the child, right? To not have an abortion. They provide ultrasounds, neonatal care, counseling. They provide information about adoption, for example, provide information about foster care. Their goal is to not encourage women to have an abortion, right? California doesn't like these. This actually came out in the case. Why? Because California is a state that favors abortion, and they actually provide funding from the state to give it. Okay, so Cody, what did California require these licensed health clinics to do?
They had to provide notice to the citizens that state of California offer these services for pregnant women along.
Exactly right. They were required to provide notice posted on the wall in the waiting room, right? And given to all clients in English and up to 13 different languages. So, I mean, I'm trying to think what the sign looks like. There's gonna be a lot of it's gonna be a big sign. Like, in Texas, you ever walk into a building, there's a sign saying that you're allowed to carry a firearm, right? Or you're not allowed to carry a firearm. It's gotta be in English and Spanish in a certain font size. It's actually very specific how those signs are structured. California, they say, you have right to a funded abortion, right? It's just sort of the 51 imperfect solutions. But it says, California's public programs provide immediate, free, or low-cost access to family planning, including abortion, yada, yada, yada. And they put a phone number. Put this in 13 languages. Dylan, why did these clinics object? Why did these clinics object to having this sign put up on their wall? It's 13 different languages.
I suppose because they weren't for abortions.
Yeah, not just they weren't for it. What's the effect? You're walking into a clinic where they say we don't want you to have an abortion, and there's a sign on the wall saying here's where you get an abortion. What's the effect of that? And really, what's the effect of having that sign up? What does that do to the message of the clinic?
I mean, it's like immediately controverting.
It's undermining their message. Exactly right. By putting this sign on the wall, it's undermining their message. This is a pro-life institution, but we're now requiring to tell you where you can get an abortion. So there's something called the compelled speech doctrine, right? So the cases say, for example, that you can't make a child salute the American flag. By the way, the saluting the flag was not like this. It was like this. It was basically a Nazi salute. That's how they did it back in the 40s. Anyway, yeah, that's how they saluted the flag. The license plate, New Hampshire, live free or die. I'm a pacifist. I don't like this message. You can cover it up with tape, right? They can't force you to have a message you disagree with. Just last term, 303 Creative, this came up in the argument today. You can't make a website designer create a website for a same-sex union, right? So you can't make you engage in compelled speech. But there's a problem, though. You've all been to doctor's offices before, right? Do they give you lots of notices about things? Anyone ever have surgery? Hopefully not. Your informed consent? Did you ever actually read it? No, I didn't. It scares you, right? When you go to any kind of surgery, you have to sign a lot of stuff. And you're kind of scared, you're thinking about it, you just check. But doctors have to give you a lot of disclosures for everything. You ever sign for a pharmaceutical? There's informed consent. You ever go into the knife? There's informed consent. Medical facilities give lots of informed consent. And there's a precedent here that's somewhat on point. It was a case that was overturned a couple years ago, but was still good law in 2018. What case am I talking about, Jacob? No, not Zatter. That's still good law. Casey, I'll come back to you, Jacob. Yeah, what was the deal in Casey, Shania?
In Casey, the court basically found that like a statute that clinics have to information on the procedures behind abortion is constitutional.
And what else do they have to give information about the clinic, the abortion clinics? Exactly. Very good. Very good. Thank you, Shania. So in Casey, we all remember Casey, right? It was good law for about 30 something years. Casey upheld a number of abortion regulations, one of which said the state must be required to, I'm sorry, the clinics must give out information about adoption and information about the abortion. Courts have also upheld the power of states to compel sonograms for pregnant women. But the law that was unconstitutional in cases, you might remember, was you had to have written permission from your husband to have an abortion. That one, O'Connor said, went too far. It was the undue burden on abortion. Okay? So there's a problem, right? Casey says that yes, you can compel an abortion provider to give information about adoption before you have an abortion. But here the pro-life people are saying, we don't want to have to disclose information about where you can have an abortion. It's almost mirror image, right? In this case, it's pro-life people saying we don't want to give information about abortion. And in Casey, it's pro-choice people saying we don't give life about anti-abortion. I want to see this sort of the conflict, the contrast. Jacob, how did, by the way, I was actually in the court when this case was handed down. This was actually Justice Kennedy's last day in the court. I was actually at the court that day. And Kennedy, after this case was decided, went to the White House and handed his resignation to Trump. This was a very, very big day, right? How does Justice Thomas, the majority, sort of reconcile Casey with this case? He does, yeah, maybe agree with it or not, but he does try to reconcile them.
Oh, I didn't think he did.
But he tried. He tried. Maybe he didn't succeed, but he tried. Kevin, you have it? Anyone? Julianne? Yeah, you got it. You got it. Well, and why does that matter, according to the Justice Thomas?
Because it goes back to court law and that's a non-practice.
Exactly. Yeah. So look, the law in Casey didn't apply to anyone who walked in the door. It only applies to a person undergoing a medical procedure. And there's a long-standing tradition of people getting medical procedures having a bunch of disclosures. In this case, by contrast, it's whoever walks in the door. You have a sign in the door. And it says there's a difference between regulating informed consent for a medical procedure and mere speech on a sign. Now, maybe Jacob doesn't find that distinction persuasive, but that's one the court gave. All right, so let's go on some more. The lower court, I'll come back to Jacob. The lower court upheld this regulation as a form of what they call professional speech. Professional speech, as if that's a new category. I scrolled up, right? But the Ninth Circuit said that there's another category of speech called professional speech that's entitled to less protection. How did Justice Thomas respond to this professional speech category?
He doesn't buy it.
Does not buy it, okay?
No, he didn't buy it. He said that there was a distinction. There's two distinctions. And I can't remember.
Kevin?
When they require disclosure of factual information, that's not controversial.
Okay, that's Zouder. Who said Zouder a few minutes ago? What's Zouder? Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin, remember Zouder? It's Zauderer. Zouderer. Hard one to say, actually. Zouderer is about lawyers and regulating. You always see these commercials. You don't look at the personal injury lawyers. You don't pay unless we get paid, right? You always see these commercials. Well, it turns out some lawyers would often make you pay anyway. You know, they say, "Oh, we're only contingency, but you have to pay fees." So there was a case saying that you have to, if you advertise, you have to give truthful information. That if you're actually billing the client, you have to charge them. Is this like that? Is this like a exposure of sort of factual information, Kevin?
Whether or not it's factual is going to depend on where you lie the issue, but Tom points out that abortion is far from non-controversial.
Okay. Thomas says that Zouderer does not apply here, right? This is not purely factual and uncontroversial information, right? This is information that's extremely divisive, on which people disagree. Also, he says it's burdensome and unjustified, right? Um, uh, if the government's interest, Eric, the government's interest is in sharing information about abortion, is this the best way of going about it by putting the signs only in certain places? Why not?
You could get the message down with broadly.
How? Hospitals, where else?
You could, over the internet.
TV, radio, buses, and so on, right? There are many different ways that the state can get this information out, but they targeted one specific place for it. The very clinics that oppose abortion. Jamar, is there viewpoint discrimination going on here? Why do you say that?
Because there are people who are against abortion, and so they clearly don't want other people.
Does Planned Parenthood put these signs up on their wall?
Do they have to? Or
Does the law require Planned Parenthood to put this up on their wall?
no, but it requires it to be in close proximity to it.
Right. So Justice Kennedy wrote a concurrence where he sort of makes this point. This law is targeting specifically pro-life people to put this message on, right? And I mean, California says is no. The reason why we're doing this is that these are the places that will not tell women about their options, right? We're doing this for a specific reason. The majority doesn't go down the viewpoint discrimination route, but it's sort of lurking in the background. Okay. And this also goes to what we said before, this concept of under-inclusiveness, right? Aaron, in what way is this law under-inclusive? In what way is this law under-inclusive? If this is such an important interest, where should this message be posted? This is such a key, compelling state interest. Where should this message be posted?
In all doctors.
Everywhere. Every doctor's office. Been said, Aaron, where is it being required to be posted? Pretty much, with some exceptions, right? So it's under-inclusive. They cite Brown against the video game violence case. All right, so this is what the court does with the licensed clinic. Julianne, let's do the licensed clinic for a few minutes. What do the unlicensed clinics have to have?
So the, like, facial
By the way, an unlicensed clinic, it sounds sort of very shady, but they don't actually provide any medical services. Like a licensed clinic will have a sonogram, they might give out vitamins. An unlicensed clinic, they're just talking to people, handing out literature, right? So it's not like sort of dirty medical office, right? They're just not doing medical procedures.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The unlicensed clinics had to have a notice on their 8/11.
That's big.
Yeah, and then it has to be in the same. The notice itself had to be in the same size or in larger font than the substance of it.
Right. So, Julianne, if you ever walked into a building with this sign on the wall, what would you probably do? You wouldn't turn around and leave?
Well, what do you mean by the sign? The notice?
The sign saying, this is not licensed. There's no licensed medical provider.
If it's not licensed, I probably.
Right. Now, do other kinds of facilities have to put the sign or just the pro-life centers? Correct. Right. Exactly right. And so the court turns to the unlicensed one and says, this is just burdensome, right? There's not a clear connection between California's interest and putting these signs in particular places. Thomas says, it's a curiously narrow subset of speakers that have to cover this. So in other words, if you prescribe contraception, you have to put the sign up. But if you just prescribe pregnancy tests, you do. In other words, this only applies to women who are already pregnant, right? Not women who perhaps are trying to avoid pregnancy in the first place. So it's targeting specific types. And he says this does not satisfy his Zouderer, and it's unduly burdensome. Okay. Questions in the majority? This is, I think, how the court sort of buried the concept of commercial speech, which is why I don't teach anymore. I used to teach, I skip it now. If this was in the 1980s, the court would have said, well, this is commercial speech, and under a 4-factor test, of course you can require the medical license facilities to put this information up on the wall. But the court just does not go down those roads that I'm interested in anymore. Okay. Ryan, what does Justice Kennedy say in his concurrence? I think I mentioned already, but.
Yeah, it's hard. Brought the viewpoint discrimination aspect of this, basically saying that the government's seeking to impose its own message on individual speech.
That's right. Okay. And there's just one line in Kennedy, and you know, I don't miss Justice Kennedy very much, but sometimes I do, just for a few months, and I remember how things were. But he had this one line where he says, um, this is Kennedy in a nutshell. He was so worried about people being targeted unfairly for their beliefs. It just really got to him. Even in Citizens United, it bothered him that some groups could spend money and others could not. Right? If you were PAC, you could spend the money, but for union, you cannot. He just what he viewed as unequal treatment just made him so angry. And he says, governments must not be allowed to force persons to express a message contrary to their deepest convictions. Freedom of speech secures freedom of thought and belief. This law imperils those liberties. This was like Kennedy in a nutshell. And he retired later that day. This was his last opinion, I think, maybe his second to last one, but his last thing he ever wrote in the court. I've actually been the travel ban. Actually, the travel ban would have been decided after this one. Yeah, this was the they go in order of seniority. So Thomas would have gone first with this case, and the travel ban came out a few minutes after that. All right. Now, Justice Breyer will be around for a couple more years, and let's see if I can find it. I have it over here. I have the audio of the hand down. It doesn't say Lochner in the thing. They actually read their dissents from the bench. This doesn't happen often, but usually every year, once or twice, a justice will read a dissent from the bench. It's considered like a drop the mic moment. It's like we're trying to get your attention. And this issue made Justice Breyer really, really mad. Let me find the clip.
Maybe it's because you spelled.
Oh, no, it's not here. I'm sorry. Good catch, but I it's not here. All right, let me jump ahead. I thought he did too. Where is it? I listened to it last night. Sorry, don't worry about it. Okay, but Breyer gets very indignant. So first he says this case is inconsistent with Casey, and he's just very much worried about Lochner. He says, in his opinion, uh, since Lochner, ordinary economic and social legislation has been thought to raise little concern, and he cites New Ice and he cites Lee Optical. But he's worried that the current court will bring us back to the so-called Lochner, which is not really a thing. He's very upset about Lochner. Okay. Questions on NIFLA? All right. So let me try to summarize a bit, and you can go home a little bit early today. I'm sure no one will object. The sort of the trajectory of the current Roberts Court is to be extremely protective of free speech. In the corporate context, we have Citizens United and NIFLA versus Becerra, but also in the civil libertarian context, you have the Brown case and also Stevens case, and Snyder against Phelps. We'll decide in the span of a couple of years, where the court is unwilling to recognize new categories of protected speech. So what we basically left with is whether something's speech was really decided in the 60s and 70s with O'Brien, right? Whether certain categories of speech is really the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But once we get to number 3, right? Once we get to whether we're in content-based restriction, strict scrutiny is fatal. And in almost every case, the government loses. We have our next class coming up. What are we doing next week? Okay, we're getting on to freedom of expression with those we can associate with. Okay? All right. Yes, sir, Ryan.
Sorry. The categories we talked about earlier, it's like speech and.
Yeah. You can. Obscenity, speech integral to criminal conduct. Yeah, those would all be in the category list. I'm not going to do it here, but you can do it. But what the court's basically saying is those are fixed, and we're not going to add any new categories. Fraud is one of them. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, what are the odds we add categories in the future?
I think very unlikely, and definitely not for your final exam. I remember when I took admin law in law school, a case was decided that morning, Fox FCC, and I cited on my exam that night. Yeah, that was me. So that's how I was studying for class. All right. You don't have to do that. I said this for common law. Your corpus of law is fixed on the last day of class. If there's a case decided between the last day of class and the exam, you don't have to know about it. I'll say that to be fair. It's true. Okay. All right. I'll see you all next week. Have a good evening.